Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is the blockchain backer bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we're going to be talking about the Bitcoin price chart. We'll touch on the altcoin market, but today we're primarily going to be talking about the Bitcoin price chart and how the clock is ticking right now for Bitcoin and macro markets to decide whether or not this thing is going to go into expansion. Now, the last newsletter that was put out entirely focused on August being the answer to cycle theory, which is what a lot of participants in this market depend on, is that every 4 years the crypto market goes into a bull run and that it has something to do with block reward halvings. But even in that newsletter, we actually focus a lot on the altcoin market and when capitulations happen and how much time elapses after that before the market goes into actual expansion. This is a chart you have unquestionably seen many times. And of course, you've seen the Bitcoin price chart many times, but you've seen it with this exact setup where I've got all these peaks marked, these rallies, these arrows, these dotted lines all in here with this fractal on top of it on this YouTube channel many times. So I noticed something really interesting on here that I wanted to talk about. And at the same time, also talk about the corrective structure that Bitcoin's been in for the last 5 months since Bitcoin peaked back in March earlier this year, but how the timing of what we witnessed last Monday showed up at a very, very interesting time. We'll also talk about in this corrective structure, we've seen these types of things before where that was the conclusion of the correction. And then I will also show you how the timing of that has worked out as well, which is utterly bizarre. This chart has been bizarre in itself. The fact that it has followed it so incredibly well. This is the 2014 bear market for Bitcoin, 2015 into 2016, and off into the 2017 bull run for the cryptocurrency market, which is really this, just to make it a little bit more easy on the eyes. But some of the things that we've noticed about this chart have been the timing of the events that have occurred in the correction. Zooming in on 2021 and 2022, we know that the peak of this market actually takes place back here on April 15th of 2021 when Coinbase IPOs. I'm not going to go through another 10 minutes in this video to make that explanation. There's been dozens of YouTube videos on that. I've given presentations in Australia on that. 90% of the altcoins all peak back in here when Elon Musk goes on Saturday Night Live there in May. Then what was fascinating about the whole move down, which we spent a lot of time talking about in 2022, was the similarities of the moves and that they had confluence to each other to eventually get down to mark our low. But the reason I have these dotted vertical lines on here is that even in each phase of it, from where the peak euphoria happens to retracement rallies to additional retracement rallies happening on the same time, then breakouts happening at the same time, the price behavior of all of this has happened very on schedule. And the only reason we bring it up so much is because they happen so on schedule to like the actual day. Now, why would this correction in any way be something interesting for right now? Well, we'd have to go back to the idea of super cycles for Bitcoin. And for those who were here in 2021, when we were picking out the top of Bitcoin, we had actually seen that Bitcoin had done 3 super cycles of this magnitude already. And that the 2018 bear market for Bitcoin was actually just a pit stop for Bitcoin in its super cycle. It left a lot of people confused on why the top of Bitcoin could come in so shallow rather than being something of 20,000%. But we argued this in 2021, particularly back there in 2020, of being like, hey, that's where we're headed to. And of course, we're in the middle of C19. Everybody's like, who in their right mind is going to pay $60,000 for a Bitcoin? Well, people did. But then when we got up here, it was just disbelief that we could actually get stopped out at this level, that of course we have to go to $100,000. But in our mid-cycle, super cycle correction in here, we had all the exact same phases that came in. And even the C19 sell-off was actually that phase before we ended up rallying and heading our way up and the run being done. But after completing an entire super cycle, what kind of correction are you looking for, right? This is really the blueprint that we have to look at to say what would happen after a super cycle is completed. And that's where we come into seeing, hey, look, all of these things happened right when they were supposed to happen. We had all the corrections happen after the super cycle was done. Hence why we have it overlaid here and why it is so ironic that the price behavior acted like this, solidifying the idea that that was the completion of an entire super cycle that happened back there in 2021, which was a super cycle that lasted from 2015 until 2021, and that this is the type of correction that you get when they're done and they completely reset. So that isn't new. We've talked about that on the YouTube channel a lot as well. But again, it's been so fascinating to see that these things have happened right on time. Even the breakouts that are happening in here after being in these long ranges, these breakouts are happening right on the exact same time. And then these breakouts. But there was something interesting that started happening in here is that time kind of started morphing a little bit in here. You can see the time is off slightly right in here. You could see, hey, look, if we're supposed to have this plunge in here, these things aren't right on time. They're off by like 5 days or so. And so this morning, I just kind of spent some time playing with this. I don't know why this was the chart I decided to kind of play with in here. I think it's because we're approaching that time where like, look, we should be seeing answers come in this market. And obviously, price action morphed in here compared to what we saw back in 2016 and 17. But one thing that we did see happen in there before the market started rallying its way up is there was this, drastic fall that happened in here, and it went down to the same price levels. We talked about this last week. But one of the whole fascinating things about the chart just in general has again been why all these labels are even on here in the first place, the timing of these things happening and them happening perfectly on schedule. Well, now we're just kind of like a couple of days off, and it's, of course I'm beating my head against the wall saying, hey, is this thing kind of like off a little bit? Am I kind of crazy for even continuing to look at it any longer like that? I started thinking to myself, maybe it's not off, right? Like, what if I just shift it over a little bit and I say, hey, look, it's actually right on point, right? I was like, okay, well, you're modifying it to suit your own needs. But then I kind of recalled that we actually have to use the Binance chart for XRP USD if we're going to look at like time or fractals and how much time things took to elapse. Because if we use the Bitstamp chart, it actually shows that we're like way past how much time had elapsed before things took off there in 2017. And the reason is because it goes back and it grabs all of the bars that are there on the chart, essentially this. But there's a problem with the Bitstamp data set, and that we can see how many days elapsed, like let's say between these two periods right here, December 18th of 2014 to April 1st of 2017. We could see it right here that it says 806 bars, 833 days. We're using the daily time frame on this chart, but there are 27 bars missing, meaning that there's no data for those 27 days. And TradingView does not add a gap on those days. And we can actually see that down in here where these days are missing. Notice right in here, we're on December 22nd, 2016. Now all of a sudden we're on January 3rd. We skip 2 whole weeks just right here between these two bars, but it doesn't add a separation of 14 bars or however many days that is to include that gap. And that is sprinkled all throughout here to give the appearances of that. However, we can't use it because so many days are actually missing from the chart. And that's why we don't actually use the Bitstamp one when we're looking over here at XRP USD, because we know there's an additional 27 days or something for this thing to actually be shifted out here. Hence, which is why we use the Binance chart, because the Binance chart has the full data set in there where we could see all of those days exist there between those times, right? 832 bars for 832 days. We're not missing any data over here on Binance. So this thing did such a great job over here for the Bitcoin price chart to be able to follow time for a correction that would take place after a super cycle is completed. And it's been unbelievably fascinating to occur on the exact same days, but for some reason, they're just kind of not right now. We're kind of off. And it's like, okay, whatever, it's 5 days, who cares, right? But the fascinating thing has been how perfect it has been. So I decided to say, well, let's just make sure that we don't have a data set missing in here while we're doing this. Because if we're going to be grabbing this whole thing and using it, then we want to make sure we're not missing data. And so noticing from right there on the peak all the way over here, we actually look at this and we say, wait a minute, there is a problem right here. There's 1,229 bars for 1,236 days, which means there are 7 days that are actually missing from this data set. And so I decided to head over to CoinTrader Pro to see if their data is up to date, which is pulling it from CoinMarketCap, in which it is. We can see over here for the entire 2014 to 2017 time period, there's 1,246 bars. There's 1,246 days. There are no bars missing. There is a bar accounted for every single day. And if we take a look at this thing to see how it looks, what do you know? That big flush that happened last Monday happens right when it's supposed to happen. And while there suddenly become some days missing in this one, we can actually corroborate that by saying, how many days elapsed from the peak of the market in 2013 until that flush took place right there? and we could see it was 1,209 days. We head over to 2021 through 2024, take a look at how many days elapse from the peak of Coinbase IPO until the flush happens. What do you know? 1,209 days. The only thing is, this thing looks off because there's like 5 days missing from the chart, but it slams it on the exact day. And I do understand a lot of people look at fractals and think, those are dumb. But the thing that was interesting about Bitcoin is how well it has done before. This was its third super cycle of the same magnitude, and it had already done an entire period to completely mimic past super cycles and with phases along the way that happened in both of them. Then it goes on to do the same corrective structures throughout that time. I even remember there in 2022, people are being like, this is the first time ever that Bitcoin's gone below its previous all-time high. And I'm making the argument, no, it's not. Look at this chart. It has definitely gone below its previous all-time high before, and it was in this circumstance. Now, one of the arguments I made when Bitcoin was rising up is that this isn't going to operate the way people are thinking that it's going to happen. Everybody's using 2017, 2021 comparisons to draw from this thing to think that this is going to break out and go to 100K right away, but that we're acting much more like this is a retracement for Bitcoin, similar to this type of behavior, rather than it actually being ready to go into full expansion. And it's now been 5 months since that peak came in for March. And as we all know, the altcoin market retraced. It wasn't able to get into expansion either. But the question now comes, is that good enough to have completed an entire correction in here that would mimic something similar to that? And we can kind of put that on top of there to take a look at it to see if it has a lot of the same anatomy of what would happen in a correction afterwards. And surprisingly, it actually is incredibly similar in here. And we'll kind of point these things out. But all real phases happen in here of what happens to before we finally get to this moment. We'll talk about this moment here in just a second, but we know that we just kind of pause out in here, goes and sets a low, it sets a low, it sets one more. Hey, then it rises back up in here, unable to get through, up in here, unable to get through. Then what do? We go and set a new low, pretty aggressive, right? What do? Set a new low, pretty aggressive. Then we pause out, rally back up to that high, and then go for the plunge. What do? Rally back up to that high, and then we go for the plunge. Now, remember, this is actually C19 that happens back in here. We see this happen all throughout broader markets. Well, what happened here? We get a volatility spike that matches that of getting to C19. The last time we had a volatility spike of this magnitude is when? March of 2020, which is that moment right there. So we get a broader market event to occur that is of that magnitude of volatility at the exact same place right when we're supposed to do it. And so I come to you saying Bitcoin still has not deviated away from this thing. August still points to the answers are there on whether or not cycle theory is going to continue. And the timing for that event to occur at day 1,209 is right on schedule of day 1,209. And we talk a lot about just, the world operates in really weird ways. I can't put an explanation on that, on why something like that would occur at the exact time that it does, or whether it's a simulation that we live in that causes something like that to occur when it does. But, then there's other things we've been looking at, say, okay, look, like, if that's the bottom, if that's going to mark it with the volatility spike, to try to see some type of reaction happen over here in altcoins at this point, which we've clearly already seen one start to do it. Will we start to see some more happening throughout this week? But I wanted to point to you that once again is happening exactly on time as this whole dingus thing has operated for the last 3+ years. And the price structure of the range that we've been in for 5 months now concluded itself with a massive volatility event that happened in broader markets in 2020. And we just so happen to have one here right now. So this thing has not deviated itself away yet. If it does, we'll talk about it right away. But the thing that actually happened there last Monday actually occurred right on time, as bizarre as that is. But there is something I want to talk about in case this thing ramps up, that the star of the show in this whole type of moment was not Bitcoin. And of course, people on Twitter and stuff will be hooting and hollering about Bitcoin because that's, a 100, a 150% rise. That something like that of that magnitude would, of course, get them hooting and hollering and screaming. But percentage wise, that wasn't the star of the show. The star of the show was actually the altcoin market. But this is like the period where you had alt season number one in the cryptocurrency market in 2017. And again, you can look at how much time elapsed in something like this. We're talking about it concluding, we've put together those like theories of being like, hey, the Fed does their cut on the 18th. That ends up being the top, right? Whether or not that ends up being the date or not, you can just look at this even in general and hear that, we're talking first week of October. Most everything is done. If anything, maybe you get into the second half of October. We're not talking much time in here. And then it's lights out. At least for the altcoin market, it's lights out. Like you could even look here, right, for XRP, right? XRP stops right there. Bitcoin still kept going, but XRP stops right there. That's this spot right here, right? That's, late September and it's over. We're already halfway through August. So an event like this, if it does take place, if this time schedule takes place and the market goes irrationally exuberant and everything is going wild and everybody's excited and they're all like, what are you talking about, man? It's just starting. We know exactly how this went in the past. And yeah, they don't last long. If you get 2 months out of this thing, that's incredible. This whole XRP bull run right here, right? 55 days start to finish. And so I don't know if it's going to get out of here, but if it does and things start getting wild in the market, it could just happen on a very quick time schedule over just kind of like, we'll see. I don't know if it's going to get out of here. Then suddenly if it gets out, it's like, okay, great. We're all super excited. And then just a couple of weeks later being like, all right, selling. And the general public would be like, what are you talking about, man? It just started. You got left behind, bro. And so I'm just kind of talking about it in that manner of like, look, it has still followed this thing for, what did we say, 1,209 days. If it got out of there and it did all that, it's only a couple of months. It's all euphoric. It's all crazy. And then it's over, man or lady. Right? This thing eventually led into a big correction in here. And then altcoins didn't do anything after that for another 7 or 8 months. It was really just a Bitcoin show from there on out. So if we get something crazy to come in here, if this thing gets moving and shuffling its way up, this is the altcoin show, but it would likely be over a lot sooner than a lot of people would think. So again, 2 steps ahead, right? But anyway, that's what I wanted to show you guys in here. The thing is still on track. Last time it corrected like this, it also happened during a volatility event. We'll see how things go. But if it does, just kind of remembering, even in this circumstance, if it continues following this time schedule, we're talking late September, October. And then again, it was like time to step away from the market. And that's hard for people to believe because we go and spend 5 months in here. Then suddenly it gets crazy. And then, nope, it's like, okay, step back again. It's like, dude, it just started. But I just wanted to show that to you. Time is still okay. Interesting corrective behavior while we have a volatility spike. And of course, some initial signs happening in here, but we need some more. But things are still technically okay. So we'll go ahead and wrap this thing up. I'll catch you guys tomorrow in Markets in the Morning. Otherwise, check out the newsletter over here at blockchainbacker.substack.com. I do audio voice record all of these newsletters and explain the charts to you over here. You get access to all the past ones as well if you sign up for the newsletter. Of course, you could check out bcbacker.com with over 40 videos and 11 hours of content teaching you how to set up your own charts and indicators within TradingView and CoinTrader Pro and talking about the historical behavior of the cryptocurrency market. You can learn how to set up your own charts a lot like I do over here on the YouTube channel. There are links down here in the description of this video to bcbacker.com and to the newsletter at blockchainbacker.substack.com. Otherwise, have a wonderful day. I want to thank you so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.